Go ahead and call the state board. They'll believe a respected head nurse long before they believe some night shift orderly.
Are you sure that's what they're going to believe?
Go ahead and call the state board, Heather Vance sneered, tossing a fake medical chart onto the desk. Her smile was sharp and completely cold. They will believe a veteran head nurse with a perfect file long before they listen to a low-level, night shift orderly. Across the desk, the newly hired orderly did not blink. He did not move in his chair, and he did not argue. Instead, he just calmly reached down to fix the strap of his duffel bag. Heather smirked, entirely sure she had just crushed another worker who wanted to complain. She was completely blind to the reality that she had just signed her own life sentence. Under the bright, white lights of the elite Autumn Crest Senior Living Facility in an upscale Ohio town, a quiet terror had been happening for 14 months. Head nurse Heather Vance ruled the building with absolute power. She used her high position to secretly give wealthy, helpless residents dangerous amount of insulin. While they were sick, she quietly stole money from their bank accounts and estates. Her latest target was a quiet, simple night shift worker named David Miller. She planned to blame him for the recent string of mysterious medical emergencies, so she could clear her own name. Heather truly believed she was ruining the life of an ordinary, low-income worker who could not fight back. She thought it would be an easy victory, but the game was already rigged against her before she even walked into the room. She had no idea that her perfect plan was about to fall apart completely, or that David was the one person who could bring her entire empire crashing down. Heather Vance sat in her private office, the glow of a computer screen lighting up her face as she worked late into the night. The building was completely quiet, except for the distant hum of the ice machine down the hallway. To anyone passing by, she looked like a dedicated supervisor working hard to keep the facility running smoothly. In reality, her fingers were rapidly typing on the keyboard, creating a web of lies that would destroy an innocent man's life. She pulled up the digital login page for the facility's high-security medical dispensing system. Instead of using her own username, she carefully typed an employee identification number and password she had secretly stolen from David Miller earlier that week. Once she was logged into the system as David, Heather began her work. She clicks through the screen with total confidence, selecting massive, unauthorized amounts of powerful narcotics and concentrated insulin. She approved the digital requests one by one, making it look like David was checking out these dangerous drugs during the middle of his night shifts. To the computer system, it looked like a clear paper trail of a thief stealing medicine from the helpless elderly residents. She made sure the timestamps matched the exact hours David was on duty, leaving absolutely no room for doubt. Heather smiled to herself as she watched the screen refresh. The digital trap was perfectly set, and on paper, David looked completely guilty. But the digital footprint was only the first part of her plan. Heather stood up from her desk, smoothed down her neat blue uniform, and opened her personal desk drawer. Inside were several used glass vials and empty syringes that she had carefully saved over the past few weeks. She placed the items into a small, clear plastic bag and slipped them into her pocket. Walking quietly down the dimly lit hallway, she made her way toward the staff break room. The room was empty at this hour, just as she knew it would be. She walked directly over to the row of metal lockers against the back wall and stopped in front of the one with David's name printed on a small piece of tape. Using a master key that only senior management was supposed to possess, Heather clicked David's locker open. She looked inside with disgust, seeing his simple winter coat, a pair of cheap work boots, and a plain lunchbox. To Heather, these items proved exactly why David was a perfect target. He was a quiet man who kept entirely to himself, never gossiping with the other nurses or complaining about the long hours. He did not have expensive clothes, a fancy car, or wealthy friends. Heather figured that someone like David did not have the money to hire a good lawyer, nor did he have the social status to make people listen to his side of the story. She truly believed that people like him were born to take the blame for people like her. Her internal thoughts were filled with a dark pride, believing that the police would never look twice at a poor, night shift nobody when a high society, respected head nurse like herself pointed the finger. Heather reached deep inside her pocket, pulled out the plastic bag containing the used medical vials and dirty syringes, and pushed them all the way to the back of the locker, hiding them underneath his extra uniform. She wanted to make sure that when the police searched the room, the evidence would be impossible to miss, yet looked like it was intentionally hidden by a guilty person. She took a step back, evaluating her work, and felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Everything looked completely natural, dirty, and criminal. With a swift, smooth movement, Heather pushed the metal door closed. The lock shut with a loud, sharp snap that echoed to the quiet break room. She stood there for a brief moment, her heart beating with excitement and absolute confidence. She adjusted her nurse's badge and took a deep breath, fully convinced that her perfect record remained completely safe. In her mind, she had already won the battle before the game had even truly started. Her final scapegoat was officially locked in, the evidence was planted, and there was absolutely nothing David Miller could do to save himself from the absolute ruin she had prepared for him. She walked out of the break room and into the night, completely unaware that every single move she made had already been noted. While Heather Vance walked away into the dark night feeling completely safe, she had no idea about the massive secret hidden right beneath her nose. She truly believed she had picked an easy victim, a helpless night shift worker who could be destroyed without a second thought. But David Miller was not a desperate, low-income orderly at all. In reality, he was a highly trained, deep-cover special investigator working for the State Attorney General's Medicaid Fraud and Elder Abuse Division. His quiet attitude, his cheap clothes, and his plain lunchbox were all part of a carefully planned act designed to make greedy and dangerous people lower their guard. He was not a victim. He was a hunter, and he had been watching the facility with extreme focus for a very long time. David had purposely taken this low-level night position months ago because the state government knew that something terrible was happening inside Autumn Crest. For over a year, the state's data systems had flagged a strange and terrifying rise in sudden medical emergencies and deaths among the wealthiest residents. The numbers simply did not make sense, and investigators knew a high-level insider with medical knowledge had to be responsible for murdering the residents. However, knowing a crime is happening and proving it in a court of law are two very different things. The killer was smart, careful, and highly respected in the community. The state needed undeniable, solid proof to lock the monster away forever, and they knew the killer would eventually try to blame someone else when things got too risky. David volunteered to become the perfect target, stepping directly into the danger zone to catch the criminal in the act. He spent weeks acting exactly like the kind of person Heather Vance would want to frame. He arrived on time, worked silently, avoided asking too many questions, and let everyone believe he was completely unaware of his surroundings. He knew that an arrogant person like Heather would eventually look at him and see an easy escape plan. David patiently waited for her to make her move, knowing that a criminal's absolute confidence is always their greatest weakness. He stayed calm every time she spoke down to him, knowing that every arrogant comment she made was just bringing her one step closer to her own destruction. What Heather completely failed to realize as she sneaked through the darkness was that David had already prepared the room for her arrival. The entire staff break room was not the safe, private space she thought it was. Days before, during a brief moment when the room was entirely empty, David had carefully installed a tiny, high-tech pinhole camera inside the metal ventilation grate directly facing his personal locker. The camera was smaller than a jacket button, making it completely invisible to the naked eye. It was connected to an advanced, encrypted state network that broadcasted a live, high-definition video feed directly to a secure government server miles away. Every single detail of Heather's criminal act had been captured perfectly on camera. The hidden lens recorded the exact moment she opened the break room door, her eyes scanning the empty room with guilt. It captured her cold, smug smile as she walked over David's locker with her illegal master key. The camera did not miss a single thing. It recorded a crystal-clear image of her face as she unlocked the metal door, reached deep into her uniform pocket, and pulled out the clear plastic bag filled with used glass vials and dirty syringes. The encrypted video stream even captured the dark, hateful look in her eyes as she pushed the illegal items underneath his extra uniform, trying to ensure he would go to prison for the rest of his life. When Heather slammed the metal door shut with that loud, sharp snap, she thought she was locking David's fate. In reality, that sound was the final piece of evidence the state needed. The live video feed had already been saved, backed up on multiple secure servers, and reviewed by a team of state lawyers who were watching the entire event unfold in real time. Heather had walked into the break room believing she was the one controlling the game, but she was actually just a puppet performing exactly how David knew she would. She had given the investigators a perfect, undeniable proof of a cover-up recorded in high-definition video that could never be erased or argued away. David's long months of working the grueling night shift, enduring her insults, and watching her suspicious behavior had finally paid off. The digital paper trail she tried to fake was instantly useless compared to the video of her actually planting the physical evidence. The trap was officially set, and Heather Vance had walked right into the middle of it. The next morning, the bright sun streamed through the large glass windows of the Autumn Crest Senior Living Facility. But the cheerful weather did not match the heavy, tense mood growing inside the building. The morning shift had just begun, and the hallways were filled with the sound of breakfast carts rolling across the floors and nurses checking on their patients. Suddenly, the quiet routine was shattered as the heavy front doors swung open. 3 local police officers, dressed in dark uniforms and carrying heavy equipment, marched purposefully into the main ward. Alongside them was a head facility administrator, a tall man with a worried expression, who pointed directly down the hallway toward the staff area. They moved with absolute determination, drawing the eyes of every nurse, assistant, and doctor in the building. The officers marched straight into the central nurses' station, where David Miller was calmly finishing his night shift paperwork. Without a word of explanation, the lead officer grabbed David by the arm and ordered him to stand up immediately. The administrator loudly accused David of stealing dangerous medical supplies, his voice echoing off the walls so that everyone nearby could hear every single word. The entire floor came to a sudden halt as co-workers stopped what they were doing to stare at the dramatic scene. The police marched David down the hall and into the staff break room, with a small crowd of curious and shocked employees following closely behind to see what was happening. The police officer stood in front of David's locker, and the administrator demanded that it be opened immediately. When David remained silent, one of the officers used a heavy pair of bolt cutters to snap the lock off the metal door. The metal lock hit the floor with a loud, ringing sound that made several onlookers gasp. The officer pulled the metal door open, reached inside, and tossed David's winter coat to the side. Then, right in front of the entire crowd, the officer reached into the back of the locker and pulled out the clear plastic bag. Inside the bag, the glass vials and dirty syringes gleamed under bright break room lights. A loud murmur ran through the crowd of co-workers as people shook their heads in disbelief and disappointment. Standing safely at the very end of the long hallway, far away from the commotion but with a perfect view of the break room door, was Heather Vance. She stood with her back against the wall, casually holding a warm cup of coffee in her hands. As she watched the police uncover planted evidence, a slow, smug smile spread across her face. She took a slow sip from her cup, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. In her mind, her plan had worked out flawlessly. She had successfully directed all the attention away from herself and placed it squarely on a helpless night shift worker. She watched the chaos unfold like it was a movie she had directed, completely satisfied that her job, her reputation, and her freedom were completely safe. Back in the break room, the lead officer turned to David and told him he was under arrest for the theft of controlled substances and reckless endangerment. Instead of panicking, shouting, or trying to explain his innocence, David showed absolutely zero resistance. He did not flinch when the officer grabbed his wrists, nor did he argue with the administrator's loud accusations. With a completely calm expression and absolute composure, David simply turned around and placed his hands firmly behind his back. The heavy metal handcuffs clicked tightly around his wrists, a sound that usually signaled the end of a person's normal life. David kept his eyes focused forward, his breathing steady and slow, showing a deep internal calm that completely confused the officers who were arresting him. The police began to lead David out of the break room in a dramatic perp walk, forcing him past a long line of staring co-workers. Heather watched from her spot at the end of the hall as David was led toward the exit, her eyes filled with victory. But what Heather completely failed to realize as she stood there enjoying her coffee was that the entire situation was completely under control. She thought she was watching a criminal get caught, but she was actually watching a carefully planned trap spring shut. At that exact second, inside a marked government vehicle parked just down the street, a federal task force was already at work. They were sitting in front of glowing computer screens, actively downloading the encrypted high-definition video feed from a hidden pinhole camera in the break room. They watched the live footage of the arrest, matching it perfectly with the recorded video from a night before that showed Heather Vance using her master key to hide those exact same syringes. The federal agents smiled as they saved the data, knowing that every step the police took based on Heather's lies was just making the case against her stronger. Heather believed she had successfully thrown David to the wolves, completely blind to the fact that the wolves were actually waiting for her. The police interrogation room was small, cold, and entirely gray. A single metal table sat in the center of the concrete floor, with two heavy chairs placed on either side. David Miller sat in one of those chairs, his hands still cuffed tightly behind his back, staring calmly at the scratched surface of the table. Across from him stood two local detectives, their jackets tossed over their chairs and their sleeves rolled up. They were radiating absolute confidence, fully convinced they had caught a major criminal red-handed. The lead detective slammed a heavy, thick manila folder onto the metal table, the sound echoing loudly off the bare concrete walls. With a dramatic flourish, the detective opened the folder and spread out several printed pages of computer data right in front of David. They showed him the fabricated digital logs that Heather Vance had faked the night before. The papers listed David's personal employee identification number alongside massive, unauthorized orders of high-dose insulin and restricted narcotics, all stamped with the exact hours of his night shifts. Next to the papers, the second detective dropped the clear plastic bag containing the physical syringes and glass vials that had been cut from David's breakroom locker. The detectives leaned over the table, getting dangerously close to David's face, using their size and authority to put maximum pressure on him. They confidently told him that he was facing decades in a maximum security prison, and because the poisoning of elderly residents involved multiple deaths, they threatened that the state could even seek the death penalty if he did not cooperate immediately. For 20 minutes, the detectives took turns shouting, slamming their hands on the table, and demanding answers. They painted a terrifying picture of his future behind bars, trying everything they could to break his calm attitude. When the aggressive shouting did not work, they shifted their strategy and offered him a deal. The lead detective slid a printed confession form across the table and placed a pen on top of it. He told David that if he signed the paper right now and admitted to stealing the dangerous drugs, they would talk to the prosecutor to take the death penalty off the table. They urged him to give up the names of his accomplices, assuming a low-level night worker had to be working with a larger ring of criminals to sell the drugs on the street. They promised him a lighter sentence if he just cooperated and gave them the names they wanted to hear. Through this entire storm of noise and threats, David remained completely silent. He did not look at the pen, he did not read the confession form, and he did not blink at the aggressive shouting. He kept his eyes focused entirely forward, staring at the wall behind the detectives with an unnerving, steady calmness. His breathing never sped up, his hands never shook. He said absolutely nothing. This complete lack of fear began to frustrate the detectives, who were used to suspects crying, lying, or begging for mercy. They raised their voices even louder, demanding to know why he was being so stubborn and warning him that his silence was to ruin his life forever. Suddenly, the intense shouting was cut short by a loud, violent slam. The heavy metal door to the interrogation room flew open, bouncing hard against the concrete wall. The detectives spun around in anger, ready to yell at whoever had interrupted their high-stakes interview. But the anger instantly melted from their faces when they saw who was standing in the doorway. Walking into the room with absolute authority was the state assistant attorney general, dressed in a sharp, expensive suit, flanked closely by the local chief of police. The two detectives immediately stood up straight, their confidence vanishing in a second as they looked at their highest-ranking boss. Before the detectives could even open their mouths to explain how close they were to getting a confession, the assistant attorney general stepped forward, pointing a stern finger at David. He did not look at the faked evidence on the table. Instead, he looked directly at the detectives and ordered them to remove David's handcuffs immediately. The detectives froze, completely confused by the strange command. But the chief of police barked the order again, his voice filled with absolute seriousness. One of the detectives quickly reached into his pocket, pulled out his key, and unlocked the metal cuffs. As soon as his hands were free, David stood up and calmly rubbed his wrist, his face still showing no signs of stress. The entire power dynamic in the room shattered into a million pieces as the Assistant Attorney General stepped up to David, extended his hand for a respectful handshake, and addressed him by his actual official title. "Excellent work, Special Investigator Miller," the Assistant Attorney General said clearly, his voice echoing in the sudden, breathless silence of the room. "The task force has a video downloaded. Your cover is officially over, and it is time to go arrest a real monster." The two detectives stood completely frozen, their mouths open in shock, as they realized the quiet night shift nobody they had been threatening for the last hour was actually the high-ranking state agent running the entire investigation. 5 months later, the Grand County courtroom was packed to maximum capacity with reporters, curious citizens, and the grieving families of the Autumn Crest residents. The air inside the large room was heavy and tense, filled with a quiet murmur of people waiting for the trial to proceed. Sitting at the front of the room was Heather Vance, dressed in a sharp, expensive black suit, her hair perfectly styled. She sat with her head held high, looking completely calm and proud. In her mind, this was a day she would finally finish her masterpiece. She truly believed she was attending the criminal trial of David Miller, the low-level night worker she had framed so perfectly. When the prosecutor called her name to the witness stand, she stood up gracefully, smoothing down her jacket, and walked confidently toward the front of the room. She took the oath, placing her hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the absolute truth, completely unaware that she was walking directly into her own trap. Heather took her seat in the witness box, adjusted the microphone, and began to testify with absolute confidence. She spoke clearly and smoothly, painting a completely false picture for the judge and the jury. For nearly an hour, she detailed David's supposed incompetence, describing him as a lazy, careless worker who always avoided his duties. She told the court that she had noticed his highly suspicious behavior during the night shifts, claiming she often saw him hanging around the medical supply rooms when he had no reason to be there. She looked directly at the jury, her voice filled with fake sadness, as she explained how shocked and heartbroken she was when police found a bag of dangerous insulin and dirty syringes hidden inside David's locker. She spoke with the authority of a veteran head nurse, and everyone in the room seemed to hang on to her every word. Her face carried an arrogant, satisfied smirk as she glanced over the defense table, fully believing she had just sealed David's fate forever. Once the prosecutor finished asking questions, the lead defense lawyer stood up from his chair. Instead of looking worried or stressed, the lawyer had a calm, relaxed smile on his face. He walked slowly toward the witness stand, holding a small, silver flash drive in his hand. This was the moment of the pivot. The lawyer looked up at Heather, his smile widening slightly, and announced to the judge that he was introducing a brand new, certified piece of state evidence that had been officially verified by the state attorney general's office. Heather blinked, her smirk freezing for a split second, but she quickly forced her confident expression back onto her face, assuming it was just a desperate legal trick that would never work against her perfect story. The defense lawyer walked over to the courtroom's media card and plugged the silver drive into the main computer system. Suddenly, the large projector screen hanging on the courtroom wall flickered to life, drawing the eyes of every single person in the room. The video began to play, and the room grew completely still. It was a crystal clear, high-definition hidden camera footage recorded from inside the staff break room months ago. The timestamp on the top corner of the screen matched the exact night before David's arrest. The courtroom watched in absolute silence as the on-screen door opened and Heather Vance herself walked into the empty break room. The high-definition lens captured every single detail with perfect clarity. The jury watched as Heather pulled a master key from her pocket, opened David's locker, and reached into her jacket to pull out a clear plastic bag filled with glass vials and dirty syringes. The camera angle was so perfect that it showed her face completely clearly as she hid the illegal items underneath David's extra uniform, her eyes filled with malicious joy. The video did not lie. It could not be argued with, and it showed the entire world exactly who the real monster was. The reaction in the courtroom was instant and overwhelming. The color drained completely from Heather's face, turning her skin a ghostly, hollow white. The arrogant smirk she had worn for months vanished instantly, replaced by a look of sheer terror. Her eyes widened as she stared at the screen, her mouth opening slightly, but no words coming out. A heavy, breathless silence suffocated the entire courtroom, so quiet that you could hear the steady hum of projector machine. The jury members leaned forward in their seats, their faces twisted in absolute shock and disgust as they looked back and forth between the video and the woman sitting on the witness stand. The families of the victims gasped, clutched each other's hands, and stared at Heather with pure fury. Heather gripped the edges of the wooden witness box so tightly that her knuckles turned white, realizing in one horrible second that her entire empire of lies had just crashed down around her in front of the entire world. The heavy silence in the courtroom did not last long before it turned into absolute chaos. The judge, an older man with a stern expression, looked down from his high bench at Heather Vance with pure anger in his eyes. He lifted his heavy wooden gavel and slammed it down 3 times. The loud, echoing bangs vibrated through the large room, instantly stopping any whispers from the crowd. The judge loudly announced that he was immediately halting the current legal proceedings. He turned his attention to the armed court bailiffs standing near the heavy doors and ordered them to secure the courtroom at once, making sure no one could leave. Then, pointing a sharp finger directly at the witness box, the judge ordered the officers to arrest Heather Vance on the spot for multiple counts of first-degree murder, financial fraud, and aggravated perjury. The inversion was complete. Heather sat frozen as 2 tall, heavily armed bailiffs stepped up to the witness stand. The very same courtroom where she had planned to watch David Miller get sent to prison forever had suddenly become the place of her own public downfall. The physical humiliation was instant and brutal. One of the bailiffs grabbed her arm, forcing her to stand up from the comfortable wooden chair, while the other officer pulled her hands roughly behind her back. The bright courtroom lights glinted off the polished metal of the heavy handcuffs. With a sharp metallic click, the cuffs locked tightly around her wrists, securing her hands in the exact same way David's hands had been bound months before. As the reality of the situation finally broke through her shock, Heather's face twisted into an expression of pure rage. She began to struggle against the tight grip of the officers, her expensive shoes scuffing loudly against the floor as she tried to pull away. All of her high society elegance vanished in a second, replaced by a desperate, ugly panic. She turned her head toward the judge and the rows of watching spectators, screaming at the top of her lungs. Her voice echoed off the high walls as she screeches, "Do you have any idea who I am? I am the head nurse at Autumn Crest. I have saved lives in this city for 20 years. She expected her long career, her wealthy background, and her fancy title to somehow shield her from the consequences of her terrible crimes. She truly believed that she was too important to be treated like a common criminal." The bailiffs ignored her loud screams, tightening their grip on her arms and pulling her down from the witness stand to begin the long, shameful walk toward the holding cells. As they led her past the wooden tables at the front of the room, David Miller slowly stood up from his chair at the defense table. He did not look angry, he did not look excited, and he did not smile at her misfortune. He simply smoothed down his jacket and turned his body to block her path, forcing her to stop for a brief second. David looked her dead in the eye, his steady gaze filled with an icy, calm seriousness that instantly cut through her frantic screaming. The entire room grew completely quiet, waiting to see what the deep-cover investigator would say to the woman who had tried to destroy his life. David did not raise his voice. Instead, he leaned in slightly and quietly said, "And you will spend the next 50 years remembering the ones you took." The final, devastating words hit Heather like a physical blow. Her mouth stayed open, but no more screams came out as the ultimate weight of her actions finally sank in. She had thought she was the smartest person in every room, but she had actually just walked herself straight into a lifetime behind concrete walls. The bailiffs pushed her forward again, forcing her past the flashing cameras of the news reporters who had rushed to the front of the room. The crowd watched with a mixture of shock and satisfaction as the arrogant head nurse was led away in chains, her legacy destroyed, her freedom gone, and her life completely ruined in the exact place where she thought she was entirely untouchable. The months following Heather Vance's dramatic courtroom collapse were marked by a series of legal actions that finally brought a sense of true closure to the families who had suffered so much. When the formal sentencing hearing finally arrived, the courtroom was packed even tighter than it had been during the trial. The judge did not show any mercy, reading out a sentence that ensured Heather would never walk free again. She was handed consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole, meaning she would spend every remaining day of her life behind the cold bars of a high-security prison. Her nursing license, which she had once used as a weapon to gain trust, was permanently revoked. She would never work in the medical field again, and the state made sure that every facility in the country was notified of her crimes, so she could never be hired by anyone. The financial ruin for Heather was just as absolute as her loss of freedom. The court ordered that every single asset she owned, her large house, her expensive car, her investment accounts, and even her personal savings, be seized immediately. These assets were sold off, and the money was used to pay for restitution to the families of the residents she had poisoned. It was a small comfort for the pain they had endured, but ensured that the woman who had tried to steal from the elderly was left with absolutely nothing of her own. The Autumn Crest facility itself did not survive the scandal either. Following the reveal of Heather's crimes, the facility faced a wave of massive, crushing civil lawsuits that lasted for months. The reputation of the once elite nursing home was completely shattered, and within a year, the building was forced into bankruptcy and permanently shuttered. The quiet halls where she committed her terrible acts were emptied and locked up, serving as a sad, empty reminder of the lives she had destroyed. While Heather's world was crumbling into dust, David Miller's career was reaching new, incredible heights. The operation he led, which had required such intense patience and steady nerves, was hailed across the entire country as a masterclass in deep cover investigation. The state attorney general held a special ceremony to recognize David's work, honoring him for his dedication to protecting the most vulnerable people in the state. He was quickly promoted to the position of regional director for the entire task force. He moved out of the undercover field and into a new office where he could mentor young agents, teaching them the same lessons of patience, preparation, and silence that had saved so many lives. His colleagues looked at him with a new level of deep respect. He was no longer just a guy who could blend into any crowd, but a leader who had proven that the truth always wins if you are brave enough to wait for it. However, the most lasting impact of the case was the change it brought to the entire healthcare system. David's work had exposed a dangerous flaw in the old way that medical supplies were tracked. In the past, all it took was a simple, stolen password to access the deadly narcotics and insulin that Heather had used for her crimes. State leaders realized that this was far too easy for someone to manipulate. As a direct result of the investigation, the state legislature passed a sweeping new law that everyone quickly started calling Heather's Law. This new mandate forced every single nursing home and medical facility in the state to completely upgrade their security systems. The old digital logbooks and simple passwords were thrown away. Under the new law, every medical dispensary had to use a dual biometric authentication system. This meant that a nurse could no longer access the drugs alone. To open the storage lockers, the system now required two separate forms of identification from two different people at the same time, such as a fingerprint scan and a retinal eye scan, or two separate authorized staff members having to verify the login simultaneously. This ensured that no single person, no matter how high their rank or how much trust they held, could ever again abuse the system to harm others without being detected. It created a permanent, double-lock barrier that stopped the kind of secret poisoning Heather had committed. David often thought back to the case, knowing that while he could not bring back the residents Heather had taken, he had ensured that no one else would ever be a victim of that same kind of greed again. The system had been made stronger, the corrupt had been removed, and justice had been served completely. The legacy of the case was not just a dramatic trial or the ruined villain, but a safer, more protected world for every elderly resident in the state. The nightmare that started in the dark halls of Autumn Crest had finally ended, and in its place, a system of real accountability had been built to last for generations to come. 8. In the end, Heather Vance treated the vulnerable people in her care like simple pieces on a chessboard she thought she owned. She moved people around to suit her own greed, completely convinced that her high position made her untouchable and that her wealth could protect her from any consequences. She looked at the elderly residents and the quiet night shift worker and saw only easy targets that she could use and discard whenever she pleased. But her massive pride blinded her to the reality of the world around her, and her belief that she was the smartest person in the building became her ultimate downfall. She completely underestimated the quiet patience of true justice, forgetting that the easiest target in the room is often the one holding all the cards. She thought David Miller was a helpless nobody who could be easily framed and thrown away, never realizing that his silence was actually the trap closing around her. Her story stands as a powerful reminder that no matter how perfect a crime might seem on paper, and no matter how much power a criminal thinks they hold, arrogance will always leave a trail that leads straight to destruction. The truth does not rush, and it does not loudly brag, but it always finds a way to reveal itself when the time is right. Heather Vance traded her sharp suits and high society reputation for a small, concrete prison cell, proving once and for all that justice will always have the final move on the board. If you want to see more arrogant criminals get exactly what they deserve in the courtroom, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications. By subscribing to the channel, you will never miss a single moment of these intense legal battles, deep cover investigations, and shocking courtroom reveals where the truth finally catches up with the corrupt. We love bringing you these detailed stories of justice being served, and your support helps us continue digging deep into the archives to find the most fascinating cases from across the country. Thank you so much for watching today's video and spending your valuable time with us. Don't forget to leave a comment down below to let us know what you thought about Heather's sudden downfall, and share this video with any other true crime fans in your life. Make sure you stay tuned to the channel, because in our very next story, a corrupt small-town sheriff thinks he can control the local courts and terrorize the citizens until an anonymous dashcam video changes everything and shatters his entire operation. You absolutely won't want to miss that upcoming courtroom drama. So keep your eyes on your feed, stay safe out there, and we will see you all in the next video.